What's going on, everybody? My name is Jordan and welcome back to my channel. So in this video I'm going to be giving you guys a tutorial on how I like to propagate my Anubias in order to make it grow faster. As we all know, Anubias is an extremely slow growing plant, so proper trimming and propagation of the plant is key if you want to grow it and multiply it like I have here. As you can see, I've got these 2 bins filled with Anubias plants. This came out of my recent 20-gallon aquascape that we just tore down. If you want to see a video on what all this Anubias looked like on my driftwood, I'll leave an annotation above so you can check that video out after as well. So guys, we have a lot of propagation to do, so let's get into it. Alright guys, so before we get into actually propagating, I'm just going to get some terminology out of the way. So the big distinction for Anubias plants that you should know about is the rhizome. Now this grows horizontally, and typically it grows in one direction. As you can see here, the right side is the older leaves and the left side of the plant is actually where the new leaves are coming out of. So this plant is actually growing in a right to left direction. Now the important thing to know about the rhizome is that it's the only part of the Anubias plant that can grow leaves. So if we want to propagate this plant, it's important to know what the rhizome is so that we can cut it and produce more plants. So another important thing to know is that the leaves and the stalks that hold the leaves can't actually produce new leaves. So if these cut, there's no use planting them or doing anything with them because they will eventually die. And not to mention, the Anubias plant grows super slow, so it's important to take care of these leaves and try to be as delicate as possible when handling the plant. Now if you're still confused exactly what the rhizome is, just simply look at the roots of the plant, because the rhizome is the only part of the plant that produces roots. So just simply follow the roots back and you'll see exactly what the rhizome is. Alright, so there's 3 ways to propagate an Anubias plant. The first one, and we're not going to cover that in this video, is to grow the plants by seeds. This would involve to have flowering plants, and seeing as I don't have any with me today, we're not going to do that method today. So the second and the third method are pretty similar to one another, but there are a few differences. So the second method is to simply cut the rhizome. Now as you can see here, if we cut the Anubias plant here, this would give rise to a baby plant, and because this is the side of the rhizome that's growing the new leaves, it would just continue growing in the right to left direction that it is, and the plant would be fine. But you may be wondering, if we cut the rhizome here, we'll have 2 ends of a rhizome on this side of the plant that aren't actually producing new leaves. Now most people would think that this plant would be kind of a dud and eventually die because it's not growing new leaves, but that actually couldn't be further from the truth. Because when we cut the rhizome, we stimulate the plant to produce brand new baby plants off of the rhizomes. Now to show you this, there's actually one on this side of the Anubias plant that you might be able to see here, but I'll get a close-up. Alright, so as you guys can see, right over here, there's a little baby plant growing out of the rhizome. Now this would have been a result from when I cut the rhizome over here, stimulating the plant to grow new plants. Also, I'm just noticing now that there is a little baby plant growing right here as well. Now the takeaway point here is that if you want to grow Anubias quickly and have many individual plants, the key is to frequently cut the rhizome, seeing as that it actually stimulates the plant to grow new plants. Alright, so I mentioned there's a third method to propagating the Anubias plant. This is actually pretty similar to the second method, but that's just that when the Anubias plant is healthy and is growing for a longer period of time and is more established, the plant will actually naturally grow off second shoots of the rhizome. So to demonstrate that, I grabbed one of the more established Anubias plants. There's a few little yellow leaves and stuff here and there, but as you can see, the plant has 2 rhizomes here that are pretty long and growing new plants. Now we could basically just split these in half and have 2 plants, but if we are a little bit more careful with cutting the rhizome, we can get many more plants out of this mother plant. As you can see, there's also even a little shoot here growing out here. So when the plant is healthy and is in a good growing condition, it will naturally grow little offshoots that we can propagate. So we can either wait for the plant to grow them naturally, or we can stimulate them to grow it. Either way, we'll get many more baby plants. Alright guys, so I'm sure you're eager to see me cut some of these rhizomes and propagate them, as well as share some of the tips for how I know where to cut the rhizome and what I kind of look for in these plants. So let's get right into it. Alright guys, so first things first is we need the proper tools for this. So what I'm using is a pretty good quality pair of dissection scissors. They're stainless steel and they're designed to be very sharp and easy to disinfect, just to reduce the chance of any kind of fungal infection or anything to the Anubias plants. This is pretty overkill. The only reason why I'm using it is just because I have the dissection kit for my program at school anyways, but a sharp pair of scissors or a razor blade would work just as well. So the first thing I like to do is to trim some of the roots. Now, this isn't really necessary. There is some talk online that trimming the roots might stimulate the plant to grow more roots. I haven't really seen anything too noticeably different from doing it or not doing it. I just do it simply because, as you can see, this plant has quite long roots and it'll make it easier to replant it in the future. So I'll just start by trimming off some of the roots. Alright, so that's a lot more manageable. The second thing I like to do is I'll look for what I like to call the leading edge of the rhizome. This is the side of the rhizome that's producing the new leaves. This is the most obvious place to cut the rhizome, so I do that first. As you can see here, this is the leading edge of the Anubias plant. So typically it's already producing new leaves and is growing in that direction. So you can get away with cutting it pretty close to the leading edge. As you can see, there's 4 leaves here on the leading edge, and then there's a little gap in the rhizome. This will make a pretty good spot to get in with the scissors and cut the rhizome, and so we'll have one little baby plant with the leading edge of the Anubias. Alright, so the key here is to come as close to this leaf as possible. This was the gap in the rhizome that I was talking about. I'm just going to get my scissors in and lay them flat against this leaf and make one clean cut to the rhizome. Just like that. So as you can see, this is a pretty small clipping from the Anubias, but it's already the leading edge of the Anubias plant, so I'm confident that it'll keep growing. And as a bonus, it has 4 leaves that are pretty mature, so I'm pretty confident that this will do really well in another aquascape, or you can put them in an immersed plant setup. This is another tip that I like to do. I have a video on how I make mine, and I find they really grow the Anubias plants faster than any kind of conditions that I've kept them in an aquarium. And if that interests you, I'll leave an annotation at the top and you can check out that video. Alright, now after I cut off the leading edge of the Anubias plant, the second thing I look for is little baby plants that are growing out of the rhizome. So as you can see here, this one actually has quite a few. It's got one here, one over here, and a couple other that you can't see in the frame right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to go as close to the base of the original rhizome, and I'm going to cut off these little plants as well, because once you separate them from the rhizome, that plant will grow a lot quicker. And if you feel that some of the little baby plants are a little bit too small, you can leave them on the rhizome. That's totally fine. But especially I've noticed in immersed planted setups, the little plants actually do really, really well. So you would be surprised really how small you could cut off the baby plants. For example, this little guy over here I think would be perfectly okay if we were to cut it off and add it to like an immersed setup. I think it would really take off there. Yeah, I'm not really sure if I'm going to cut this one off or not. It kind of depends whether I think this plant's going to go in like an immersed setup or if I'm going to use it in my next aquascape. But definitely this guy here is good to come off. So very carefully I'm just going to get in underneath the rhizome and make one clean cut. There we go. So you can see here, this is the little baby plant. This guy's going to do really well in an immersed setup. But if you wanted to plant this in your aquarium, as long as it's in a good area that has nice good light, this will definitely take off. This same plant also has another little baby plant over here that I'm going to cut off as well. So again, just cutting it as close to the base of the original rhizome as possible and make one clean cut. There we go. And there's that little baby plant that we just cut off. And as you can see, this one even has a little root coming out of its baby rhizome, so that's definitely a good sign. So now that we've cut off the leading edge of the Anubias plant and all the other baby plants that are growing, that have been growing off of the rhizome, we're going to move on to splitting up this rhizome. As you can see, I'm going to leave this little baby plant on the rhizome for now. So what I like to do is look through the rhizome and look for spots that may be good for cutting. So for example, I see one right over here. I could easily get my scissors in there and cut that. As you can see, if we cut it here, we would leave quite a few leaves on the left side over here to help that plant get established. And it probably wouldn't cause any damage to this leaf over here. So yeah, I think I'm going to cut right in there. So my scissors are in, I'm pressing them up against the leaf on the right side of the rhizome. I'm just going to make one clean cut. There we go. So now we have one little plant with about 5 leaves on it. And even though it doesn't have a leading edge on this Anubias plant, this will stimulate this little plant to grow some new leaves. Here's another good vantage point to cut the rhizome. Just have my scissors slipped in there. And one clean cut. As you can see, this plant shows a little bit of signs of nutrient deficiencies from the previous setup, but it'll definitely get going now that it's propagated, and it'll go into a hopefully better setup. Alright guys, I just wanted to make one little announcement. If you accidentally pull off a leaf and end up with a rhizome that has absolutely no leaves on it, that looks something like this, don't freak out, and especially do not throw out that piece of rhizome. You can easily salvage it and put that rhizome in an immersed setup. Just lay it on some soil in a high humidity area, and sure enough, with some time and sunlight, you'll grow off little new plants just like that. These rhizomes of the Anubias plant are so hardy, and it takes so much to kill them. So even if you think that you've killed the plant by removing all the leaves and you just have this rhizome with no leaves, as long as it's green and as long as you can put it in a high humidity area, it will grow a plant, I guarantee it. As you can see here, there's a little tiny baby plant growing off this tiny little clipping of rhizome. I just wanted to show you guys this to illustrate that you can propagate one mother plant into so many little plants if you use these tips. This is probably one of my biggest tips and one of the biggest reasons why I have so many Anubias plants. I didn't start off with very many. I've grown them over using these techniques that I've shown you. They work, and they work really well, and I hope that you guys use them and propagate your plants, because an aquarium filled with Anubias plants is just one of the most beautiful things you can look at. When I was a beginner at propagating Anubias plants, I definitely would have thrown out a little piece of Anubias clipping just like this. It does happen where you accidentally pull off an Anubias leaf and you have this rhizome that doesn't really have any leaves, but sure enough, hopefully this is proof that you can use those little rhizome pieces and grow new plants. And you know, with some time, this plant will definitely grow bigger, and what you would have just thrown out in the compost or in the garbage, well, now you have a beautiful plant. So definitely use these tips, guys. Alright, and thank you very much for watching. This was a few tips that I like to use when I'm propagating my Anubias plants. As you guys can see, I have a lot more propagating to do, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you thought these tips were helpful. If you have any questions, I'll be answering them all below, so leave a comment if you have a question. And if you want to see some more videos like this, as well as some of the more projects that I have coming down the pipeline, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.